bit about WiscNet's approach to bandwidth pricing and other things. Shaun, Abshere, and Lois from WiscNet, and joining us via video conference. And our next speaker is Bob Nixon. If you're wondering who's up there on the silver screen. So I'm going to turn it over to Shaun and David.
Good morning, everybody. It's going to be a little different. Talk a little bit about business models, which are boring as all get out. That's one of the problems we have here today. The other problem we have here today is the way we've broken this up is Dave's going to speak and Shaun's going to answer questions. And truth be told, is Shaun is better at presenting and I'm better at questions. So we're going to experiment right from the onset. What we're looking at here on the screen right now is, I don't know, you can call it anything you want, whether it's an orange apple or whether it's a pine orange or the one that seems to be floating around now, something called corn, which for some reason really sticks. And what it was our moniker for our Future Technology Conference, which is our annual conference annually from 2007. And the theme of this is, what will we think of next? The concern we had mostly is we really didn't know. We knew we had some issues on the table and what we call erosion issues. And I'll lead those through as we talk about these. But erosion issues are something we'll just call problems we had in the offing and we weren't 100% sure how to deal with it. Part of what we're going to talk about is what we think we've got our arms around a piece of some of the things we want to do. First and foremost, as we go through this, you need to understand a couple of basics about WiscNet. One is we have no GPR funding, or we get no money from state or federal government directly. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, and so cutting to the chase, in order to do the good things that we think we're doing in Wisconsin, we have to have relevant services that we can resell. And we're also have a long history. We're old. I'm not old, Shaun's older. But we're an old organization doing this thing. We're about 20 years old now. We're getting very close. So what we really are to a lot of folks that paying attention to these sort of things is we're the original ISP in the state of Wisconsin. We're not the Research and Education Network. And both of those are some of the erosion issues that I'm leading in here. So be thinking about that as you hear about this with relevant services and trying to be a research and education network, and quite frankly, not that ISP that I talked about. Just a little bit about what the heck we're trying to do. We have two footings we're trying to do with our current strategic plan. We're trying to advance the network, and the other one is advancing the community. What those mean at any point in time is up in the air. We're trying to figure that out. We don't have like all good strategic plans, we've got good ideas, but we don't necessarily have the tactics behind them, and we continue to work on them. What we're hearing with Grow Smart is pieces and parts to both of those. I won't go talking about this. I want to make sure we keep on task here and we open this up for questions, so I'm going to be moving right through. One of the things that we replaced, remember I said Grow Smart is about the business model. We replaced the old business model. The old business model was something we call the membership fee, and notice the emphasis, and notice the question mark on that. And the other thing is something we call variable cost. Let me go through those too quickly. This really boiled down to what we charge you for what we call network access services. Membership fee was not really a membership fee. We were not a membership organization, though that's what we said we were. It's kind of what we said and what we were doing is two different things phenomenon. The membership fee is we added up all the fixed costs or whatever the board of directors decided in any given year what the fixed cost of the network is, and that was your membership fee. Welcome to the organization. Then of course we've got organizations from the smallest school district through UW-Madison. So then we had a usage fee tacked on top, and that was more or less our business model, and that's where we're moving forward. But if you think about that, if you have a membership fee that's not really a membership fee, people can see through that. And the variable cost had some issues too that we'll talk about, and most notably, with what we think happened, we don't think what happened. One of the problems is, though, it allowed you to be incredibly responsible with how you utilize the network. It also created something we call a culture of bandwidth poverty, and that is you tried to minimize your use. Well, if you come back to the onset of this conversation where I talked about we're a research and education network, Well, the last thing we want to do is have a culture or create a culture or be responsible for the culture that creates limited use or reduction of use. Now all of that seems okay. That seems obvious. But getting back to what I talked about erosion issues, we could identify the problem quite readily. And there's many, many more on the list. Matter of fact, before we developed the Grow Smart, which was done via a board retreat type of session, the onset of the conference was I gave a list of about 20 erosion issues that we were dealing with, and there was a lot of heads going, those are tough. But this is what we came up with, and this really is an important step off point. What is Grow Smart from a business model perspective? First and foremost, I could care less about what I think folks want to listen to. First and foremost, I got my true membership fee that I always wanted. I don't know how we can be a membership organization without having a membership fee. But getting K-12s and other folks, it's not just about problematic K-12s. If I'm coming across like that, that is so wrong. It's about how do you come up with additional funds but make it significant that you are a membership organization. That was a challenge that I put before the board. We have that. We're mostly there. And it's a $1,000 membership fee. And then what we're going to do with the rest of the network access fees, whatever you paid in this fiscal year is what you're going to pay in the next 2 fiscal years. So we don't care what you use. I don't care how much you use, how far you, what you want to use it for, what network you change, any network characteristics you change, anything you use regardless of whether you're UW-Madison or whether you're the smallest school district, that fee will remain the same. So if you're paying $5,000 this year, you'll be paying $5,000 2 years hence. How the heck did we get here? And I'll go over this real quick. This is our network access budget. We spent 3 or 4 years patting ourselves on the back saying what a wonderful job we've all been doing. Look, we keep reducing your cost. Isn't life great? All the while we did that as well as on the use side, use continued to grow. So though the costs were going down, use was continuing to grow. Gosh, we were doing wonderful stuff. Here's where one of the erosion issues got stuck in my craw. I kept looking at this graph and I said, you know, we've patted ourselves on the back for 3 years. We're doing a wonderful job, 4 years rather. But you know, if you watch this trend, that's not a race I want to win. That's a race to the bottom, and we were definitely on it. And there's a point when obviously you can't do stuffs anymore, or you put yourself in such a fiscal bind that you can't go anywhere. So one of the things we talked about in this particular situation was what to do about that. I don't want to go into this long. I'll open this up for questions because I know this is a little longer talk than what I have time for. One of the things that you're going to hear about Grow Smart is there is going to develop a lot of questions. I hope I hear questions today because we're going to take them back and work on them because getting from the broader community, it's a good way of thinking about it. We don't know exactly what's out there on that horizon and how we're going to go about fixing those. But what we do know is we've taken an important step forward and we think we have answers to some of those fiscal questions. But more importantly, I'm going back to that. It's not about this. The board will have to work on what happens after Grow Smart from a fiscal budgeting perspective. The staff, Shaun and I's challenge, and the folks in the K20 initiative that we have here, we've got some new folks coming on, working on the community side of that strategic plan. It's our job to figure out what to do with that use, how to promote use. It's also the realization that WiscNet doesn't own the world of networking in Wisconsin. I'd be willing to say there's a lot of states that have that situation where they're a piece of the bigger puzzle, not the whole piece. So part of Grow Smart is remind folks that we can do some of these things, lead by example, promote more use, grow the use of the network, and then frankly, I even heard a little bit today, bandwidth isn't particularly that inexpensive. We spend a lot more time and energy trying to figure out how to use less than if we just took that same time and energy and resource. And I equate all resources to money. That's just the way my job works. And if we're throwing those kind of people resources at it, I think we could actually use those people resources in bandwidth reduction to do more and just buy more bandwidth. So the challenge is not about that budget model. The challenge is not about what this means from a business model perspective. It's about growing use and doing something important with that use and showing off what can be done and the what ifs, you know, opening up the opportunity of, well, what if Wisconsin could do this? what if we did some things differently? And in a nutshell, that's it. We'll just open it up for questions. And I know I left a lot of doors open on that. Can't be no questions.
What I don't see is where you're going to be watching for your spike to come along, where you technology refresh on your network switches. And as you go to the larger and larger bandwidth, eventually you're not already there, you get optical switching, right? When you get optical switching, you're going to see the cluster spike large. How does the capital reserve rate?
You're supposed to get questions. I do have
Well, I'd love to hear.
Quite simply, that's already been done. Going back to right here, what that really represents, probably 3 technology refreshes. Our history at WiscNet, for a whole variety of reasons, suggests that we have redone the network every 2 years. I know that sounds crazy, but I can actually bring evidence to that. We've also, in that time, through those budget reductions, we put on optical gear. We have a full optical backbone up now. We have switching capability, not routing capability, but switching capability at 10 gig right now. So that the money we have, or the money we spent, or the budget that this thing represents, which is in fact true over that period of time, suggests that we can continue the technology refresh. Suggests. Notice I didn't say it absolutely does. It suggests. So actually, it was the evidence that this graph represents that suggests we can take a swing at this. I would also go to say that this puts us in a lot better fiscal situation to level that out there. Meaning, if in fact the amount of cost continues to drop, it gives me this as a margin to build in new technologies, different things, as well as budgeting capacity for the unknown. Rich.
One of the issues in general internet policy is this one of that used to be called net neutrality, now it's being called network management. But it comes down to whether you punish, in the BitTorrent sort of issue, it comes down to whether you punish people who are bandwidth hogs. And Internet 2 has always said we have a better, higher education said we have a better solution, more bandwidth, and you seem to be taking that approach. Do your membership fees actually, and your charges actually connect in any way to bandwidth usage?
Go ahead.
My turn?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so that what I'm facing is this, what people call pricing equity. When your members find out that some people are getting double, triple, a dozen times the bandwidth usage for their 5,000, and so what do you tell them? Well, use more. Is that what you tell them? Use more. It's your fault. It's not our fault.
Actually, that's a piece of it. That's a piece of it. I do think there'll be a degree of leveling after that. But one of the things I want to point out once again on this graph is the time duration. Going back to WiscNet's budget model, we had to be significant to each and every one of our 430 members. It had to matter, it had to benefit them. So by now bringing out your question about their checkbook, clearly it mattered to them, and they felt it was equitable. They felt like it was a good deal or a reasonable deal, or at least the money they had invested in WiscNet was worth it. Our take as we start off on Grow Smart, which is a campaign, it's not just a budgeting phenomenon, it's a campaign. It was equitable in 2008. It'll be equitable in 2009. 2010, I'm thinking not so much, and by 2011, we're going to have a better answer for you. I will say the board our board of directors, we're governed by a member representative board of directors. I guess I missed that piece. Our board of directors has already talked about that. One of the most provocative questions they offered in the last meeting, which, by the way, frankly, I don't care if it's work. I don't necessarily know whether I buy this, but it's interesting. Somebody goes, why do we care so much about equity? This research and education network we have in this state is critically important to us. You've been able to budget this amount of money for long periods of time, for many, many years. WiscNet has been in existence for 20 years. We don't worry about equity. Let's worry about keeping this WiscNet ship afloat and say, no, that's what your fee is. Thanks for participating. And it's not meant to be that flip, if that came off flip. It's meant to be a whole recognition that we are a research and education network. God darn it. And bandwidth is unimportant. So if you're counting your bits and saying, he's using more, so when Shaun stood up and said the answer to that is no, we're not counting bits anymore, we have a whole culture of counting bits that we're trying to negate. And it's going to be an interesting endeavor. And I will also be the first person to say this is a transition. This is a high-level experiment. 3 years I may be coming back with a lessons learned conversation. and just the fact that I'm back at the microphone, then it was a pretty good lessons learned. If it happens, then, let's shoot that guy that came up with this. Or shoot the guy that said he came up with this, that sort of thing, then I won't. But I don't necessarily have a great answer for that right now, except there is equity built in now. There's no reason we can't continue that going forward.
Can I give I'm not exactly with WiscNet, but I'm a user of WiscNet, and I also have a little bit more of the answer to that same question. Is that okay if I go into the rest of the network? WiscNet doesn't provide the pipes and data, they provide the data and a lot of the ancillary services to it. We have another state lease network on our behalf, and for most, especially our K-12 districts, depending on packages and a whole bunch of other factors, they get between about 3 and 5 meg within that network. So what the state has done is they're funding the pipe, the last mile, at a ridiculous rate, and they lower the first step down very, very far. So instead of having nice even steps for bandwidth, the road to get to WiscNet, the first step is down very, very far. The problem is it very quickly escalates after that first step, and the cost of the pipe to access the state lease network is very expensive. I'm in the area between Chicago and Milwaukee, so we have a lot of service very cheap, and it isn't always, the state's network isn't always the best bet. So what we're finding now is as we go to third-party providers, we're able to get bigger pipes, and the nice thing is then WiscNet is able to provide us more data. So there's another limiting factor here, which is if you live in a rural area or you live somewhere else, the state network isn't necessarily allowing you to consume all you can eat. But I have schools that are now going to 10 meg and 50 meg, and a museum that will hopefully be on fiber and well over 100 meg in the very, very near future under this plan as we start converting people to those type of things. And it's basically, whether you have 50 meg and you're only using 20, or on any given day, maybe 10, it kind of levels out like you say, but we want a burstability, we want a factor of a network where bandwidth is completely unimportant as a user. So far people aren't complaining about equity from this standpoint, they're complaining about equity in that they can't necessarily afford the pipe to get to them because that's held by a third party, which is the state.
And that's part of the leadership by example that I offered. One more question, maybe? Yeah.
I think Dan may have answered my question, but what I was curious is how do you define unlimited bandwidth, and is it based on the connection of the organizations to your state network, and if so, what is the average connection size to your organization?
I don't know the answer to the second part, but I'll give you a challenging answer to the first part. Your part of your question said, well, what is the pipe size, what is the bandwidth available? One of the challenges we are actually taking on with this campaign is get bandwidth out of the equation. So if you start by saying, well, okay, let's not talk about bandwidth, but I have this much pipe, how much bandwidth can I get? That's actually a non-starter, is what we're trying to do. I really think there's merit in seeing how much we can change the culture. Can we totally turn it totally upside down? Absolutely not. I don't believe that. But if we can get people thinking beyond the limitations of bandwidth, I think we've made a major step forward.
And we agree, I just have an additional comment, we agree with that for Merit Network in Michigan. We run the R&D network there in Michigan. We agree with that, and we're trying to take that equation out and allow them to use as much capacity of bandwidth they can based on our connection. Our governing members are definitely served that way, but our other membership, they do pay for services in a different kind of way. And what I was wondering is how you define unlimited bandwidth, and so I think I understand.
It's not a question as much as a comment. One of the things we're doing for Vero, we've created a rallying cry that this seems to fit very well. So, and it's the first time I've ever heard a provider talk like this. But
Providers, excuse me. Correct. We're over. Thanks for having us.
That's right.
We're establishing a rallying cry calling educating beyond the bandwidth barrier. And we believe that this type of thing is exactly what needs to happen, is that you stop worrying about bandwidth, because there will come a day when it's not the issue anymore. And we need to start embracing that, look at education models, and what do we do when that day gets here. And it has to start somewhere, so I applaud the effort here. And I was curious, are you going to be publishing the results of your experiment, if you will, anywhere that we'll be able to see this over time and how well it works out for you?
We'll think about that. I think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, our board minutes are public and on the web, so that's one way to follow it. Certainly to our website, you're certainly free to subscribe to our print newsletter. So just in terms of communications to our members, that's available. Also to the several national organizations we're members of, state nets, quilts, Lois, Internet, all that. I'll give you my card.
Thank you all. We're going to be around the whole conference, so thanks for your time.